Hello, everybody. Welcome to Citizens for Global Solutions, Minnesota. Today is April 15, 2021, and we have wonderful speakers for us. We have Nancy Hollander and Mohamedou Ould Slahi. So today we'll be speaking about the story of Mohamedou Ould Slahi, the Mauritanian. Most of us watched the movie, The Mauritanian, and this is the opportunity to discuss and talk about what happened with him, and also to talk about Guantanamo. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted in our website probably in 1 week. So you can go back and look for past events and the video recording. Please keep your microphones muted so we avoid background noises. And after our speakers, we will open for questions from the attendees. So our first speaker is Nancy Hollander. Nancy, thank you so very much for agreeing to speak with us. Nancy has her law degree from University of New Mexico. She works for Friedman, Boyd, Hollander, Goldberg, Urias, and Ward. She also works as an associate tenant at London's Doughty Street Chambers, which specializes in criminal law, international law, and human rights. For more than 3 decades, Ms. Hollander has practiced and devoted to represent individuals and organizations accused of crimes, including those involving national security issues in trial and on appeal. She was lead appellate counsel for Chelsea Manning in the military appellate courts. She also won Ms. Manning's release in 2017 when President Obama commuted her sentence from 35 years to 7 years. Ms. Hollander has also represented the 2 prisoners at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, and in 2016, she won the release of one of them, Mohamedou Ould Slahi, after 11 years of pro bono representation. And this discussion today is about Mohamedou and Guantanamo. Nancy, thank you so much for coming. Welcome, and it's your floor. We would love to hear what you want to say.
Well, I'll only talk for a few minutes. I met Mohamedou in 2005 when a French lawyer heard from a Mauritanian lawyer that Mohamedou's family was looking for him and had been looking for him since November of 2001, and that they thought he was in Guantanamo, and would I find out and then represent him. And it was difficult to actually find out that he was there. They wouldn't say unless we filed something that whether he was even there or not. But we found him. My co-counsel, Teri Duncan, who at that time was my associate and is now grown up to be a well-respected and long sought after death penalty lawyer. But I went there with another lawyer who spoke French. I didn't know anything about Mohamedou. I didn't know what was true, what was false, what had happened to him, what languages he spoke. I hoped that he spoke French because we didn't have an Arabic speaker with us. It turned out he spoke English, which was fantastic. And I walked in, we walked in to where they had decided we would meet him. They're kind of little huts. And he was sitting behind a table, and he got up, and I'll never forget this moment. And it's pretty much in the movie. He put his arms out to hug us. like to hug us, but he didn't move. And we kind of didn't know what that meant until we saw that he couldn't move because he was bolted to the floor. He had an eye bolt and a chain around his ankle. And we literally walked into his embrace. And he said, "My lawyers." And he can describe from his perspective what that was like. That's when we began. It was a long process. There were years when nothing was happening, that Teri and I just took turns every couple of months going to visit Mohamedou. This is not like any other prison. If any of you do criminal defense work, where you can arrange for a call with your client, send letters that are actually going to get there in a timely fashion. None of that happens. And it's not like you go in and you fly in and you spend a couple hours with your client and you say, well, I'll get the next plane out, because there is no next plane out. You go to Guantanamo, you get there on Monday morning, and you're there till Thursday or Friday when the flights leave. That's it. And I've gone down in all kinds of planes, C-130s, chartered planes, everything. I've stayed all over the island in various accommodations. The only one I haven't stayed at, thank goodness, was the tent. And I almost had to stay in the tents, but fortunately didn't. And in 2010, we won Mohamedou's habeas case. Judge Robertson ruled that the government did not have sufficient evidence to hold him. All they had to prove was that it was more likely than not. They did. This is not a criminal case. They didn't have to prove proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They had a very tiny, just tipped the scales a little bit, and they would have won. And they couldn't even do that because, of course, there was no evidence. Mohamedou's an innocent man. And the judge ruled that he should be released. But President Obama's Justice Department appealed all the cases, or almost all the cases that were won, even though President Obama said that he wanted to close Guantanamo. And the Court of Appeals sent the case back to the district court, but that court didn't rule on it. And for 6 long years, we didn't know whether Mohamedou would ever get out. Teri and I promised him we would always be there. And then all of a sudden, the Periodic Review Board announced that it was his turn. This was an organization, really, that not a court, that President Obama set up by executive order. It involved 6 security agencies. We didn't know which ones. The CIA, FBI, NSA, DIA, who knows? We weren't allowed to know that, but they had to rule that at that moment, Mohamedou was not a significant threat to the United States or its allies. They ruled that, and then it took several months more, and finally he landed in Mauritania in October of 2017, is that right? 2016. He landed there. He didn't get a passport for 3 years later, until 2019. The US, the US gets a hold of you, they don't let go. The countries had all agreed when they took detainees that they would not give them passports for 2 or 3 years. Mohamedou, unfortunately, was one of the 3-year ones. And we're now working on trying to get him visas into Europe, where countries say, well, he's a security risk. And I keep saying, if he were a security risk, he wouldn't have been released. So how can they say this? I just want to say one other thing, and that is that originally, I signed the contract for all these books, 27 languages. His book has been translated into 27 languages, and I signed all of those contracts. Mohamedou was in prison. I signed the contract for the film, and in 2015, when the book came out, in the hopes that this film and the book would help get him out. I think the book did help. but of course he got out long before the film. And now I think Mohamedou, I know he will agree with me that we want this film to help get the other 40 out, get them out of indefinite detention, close the place, deal with everyone is there, no matter how differently they may have to be dealt with to get their cases resolved, or their lack of cases, because approximately 33 have never been charged. So that's where we are. I love this film. I think that Kevin McDonald did an inspiring job of showing Mohamedou's life, Mohamedou's dignity, and his humor. Mohamedou's really a very funny guy. And even through all of this has maintained his humor and goodwill. And, you know, that's where we are. We want everyone to see this film and follow through with what it asks everyone to do. So
That's wonderful.
that's kind of what I have to say.
Thank you, Nancy. And before we start asking questions to you, I'm going to call Mohamedou to speak for us. Mohamedou, it's your floor.
Hi, everyone. I just would like to apologize if my internet connection is not the best all the time. And I thank you so much for inviting me, Citizens for Global Solutions, Minnesota. That is exactly what we need, global solutions, the bigger picture. And I feel very privileged. As to my person, I was born in Mauritania, a small country in West Africa, 1970, to a camel herder, my father. And he died when I was in third grade. I went to school as the first of my siblings. I have 11 siblings, 5 sisters, and we are 7 boys. And the reason why I went to school because I was too small to work and no one would give me any job. So it was like, what you gonna do? And I fell in love with school for no apparent reason. I just, when I went to back home, I just wanted to go back to school. The time that I spent at home was like torture because I found the warmth in school and I found the welcome in school because I wanted what they taught me and I wanted to learn a lot. I remember this day, it was very hot and I had to go to school 2:30 p.m. So to catch my class at 3 p.m. It was hot and I didn't have shoes. I used to walk to cool down my feet. And we had this, I would say, nosy neighbor, and she caught me on my way to school and she stopped me and scolded me for not having my shoes. And she told me, shame on me, why didn't I wear my shoes? But I was too ashamed to tell her that my family was too poor to buy me shoes. So I had to go back, pretending that I'm going to collect my shoes and to take another route to go to school. That's the kind of circumstances I grew up in. And I'm not the only one. And I was not the poorest kid in school. This was like Mauritania, post-colonial, no values, very much. And so my obsession with school gave me a chance to do very well. And I won a scholarship as a teenager for Germany, a country I hardly ever heard of. And I went there and studied microelectronics, what they call information technology. They call it nowadays new technology. I graduated and worked a little bit, and tried to immigrate to Canada. But my name was already flagged due to a phone call that I received from my cousin, who is a very close friend to the lady. I got in trouble because of my name and nothing else. And Canadian intelligence, Mauritanian intelligence, and American intelligence collaborated to get me out of Canada and kidnap me. And that's exactly what happened in 2000, January 21st of 2000. And I was taken to Mauritania, and I was later on stripped of my passport and forbidden from leaving the country. After 9/11, I was put in a plane and sent to Jordan, where I spent 8 months. CIA took me from Jordan and sent me to Bagram, where I spent about 2-3 weeks. And I was taken to Guantanamo Bay, a place I never heard of before. On August 2000, and I stayed there until end of 2016 when I was released. And the rest, Nancy said it. Of course, I remember vividly the day I met Nancy. Nancy and her colleague then, Sylvia, who first met me, those were the first American civilian I ever met, since my kidnapping. And I was so hopeful because when I was younger, I used to watch Married with Children, a show I love so much, and Law and Order. And I had this like stereotypical image of the small guy fighting the very powerful government. And I had no doubt in my mind, I will go home very soon. I was so happy to meet Nancy, but I was the victim of my ignorance that America is a very young democracy, and America is still trying to find its way for better or worse. Today, I know, which, makes my heart pain that America still to this day does not recognize human rights as universal. They always say that human rights, the rule of law, should be limited to American citizens, not to human beings. And that made me suffer a lot. Had I known this, I would never have turned myself in, because I willingly turned myself in to the police every time they asked me. And I'm so happy first to know the good American people who stood by me, like your organization, and to understand that the world is much bigger than the small place I grew up in and the small cultural background I was raised in. And I see human beings, and I don't see any more black person, white person, brown person, Muslim, Christian, or whatever denomination. I see a human being, because that's something that binds us all. And I'm so happy to learn that lesson, even though I did it in the harshest of times. And I'm still, like Nancy mentioned, still trying to pick up the pieces and normalize my life, be able to travel the world, promote my book, have a new book, Ahmed and Zarga, promote my movie, meet people face to face, and work on the issues that gets me going, like human rights and the release and the closure of Guantanamo Bay.
Thank you so much, Mohamedou. It is just amazing what you went through. So I have one question for Nancy and one for, I have many for all of you, but I won't do that with you guys. To Nancy, I wanted to, one of the questions that I had for you is, as I was watching the movie, my husband and I were, he's a lawyer too, and I was, it looked to me that I was reading Kafka. You know, you couldn't access the files of your client, and I don't see how to defend or to be a lawyer without reading what you have to read. So for me, this was one of the most frustrating parts, legally speaking. But I wanted to ask for you, what was, for a lawyer, for a criminal defense attorney, a human rights attorney, what was worse for you?
Well, I think the worst for me was knowing that my client, my friend, had been tortured, and that everything he said about his torture, which we didn't know at first whether any of it was true, but it was all true and it was horrible. And that was perhaps the worst. And then just the long years when nothing was happening in his case, both from 2005 until 2008, when the government, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Boumediene that the government would actually have to respond to the habeas cases. And then things moved for a while. And then to know also that that President Obama was not going to, Holder and the Justice Department were not going to go out of their way to help anyone in Guantanamo get out, which they could have done. They didn't have to appeal Mohamedou's case. All they had to do was just not appeal, and he would have been out in 2010, already too long. But the whole situation there, it's hard to know what was the worst. Leaving Mohamedou every time was really hard for me. I've had other clients in prison, but I don't think I've ever had any when, as I walked away, I cried, not knowing what they would do to him next, what would happen next, and not having any sense that I could find out until 2 months later when one of us went back down there. It was very difficult the whole time.
Mohamedou, I always, when I think about your story, and I think about everybody that has been in Guantanamo and the 40 men that are still there, I always think about the situation of Guantanamo as we here learn, and I'm sure there are still things that we don't know. If you could speak, what was more horrible for you? Was it the torture, or would you say something else? Or you can list other few things. What do you think was more difficult for you? You are muted.
Thank you, Kasia, for these questions. I mean, Nancy said she doesn't really know what was. I mean, if someone takes you, blindfold you, and earmuff you, and put you in a truck, and take you to a place you don't know where, there is no talking, and they never tell you any reason why they take you there. No reason. Complete quietness. And then after 24 hours of driving and flying in the mixer, find yourself in a place you don't know anything, and they put you in a cell. They close it. I think that's enough to destroy someone's spirit. Enough. I'm not talking about torture. I'm not talking about diet manipulation. I'm not talking about starving you. I'm not talking about sleep deprivation. They give you food, they give you everything. Incommunicado. You cannot talk to anyone, you cannot see anyone. You have no explanation. No. That's enough. But Guantanamo is more than that. Guantanamo is built to completely circumvent the rule of law and to undercut international obligations of preserving human dignity and treating people within the rule of law. Geneva Convention, so if you take someone who having a gun trying to kill you in an army, they have rights. You cannot interrogate them, you can only ask them their rank and their unit, that's it. And you put them in prison, treat them myself as an enemy combatant, a new term I never heard of in my life. And I did not have a gun. I was working, feeding my family. And I can go on and on, but I can tell you that one of the moments that hit me very hard is when they told me that my mother was going to be arrested and be put in a prison with only men, insinuating that we would be raped. He even, I think, told me that they could not guarantee her safety. And at that moment, I know I had nothing to lose. And I was ready, I want to tell them everything. And there is one thing, you know, that it's amazing. I feel guilty about everything. I felt guilty about putting my family in this trouble. And I all, because of this barrage of interrogation, I told myself one night, maybe I did all of this, but I don't remember it. Really, this is really happened to me. And the death of my mother, I remember vividly when my lawyer, Teri and Nancy, called me, they said, your mother passed away. I didn't know what to do. This is not what, you know, you have someone to hug, to cry on their shoulders. I was alone in myself. I remember I had to stand up and sing the Quran all the way. And Quran is like 640. To me, I need 24 hours, about 24 hours. Let me say, 5. Now you need 12 hours straight. And because I wanted to weaken my body, because I couldn't live with my body working. I need to shut down my body so I could find pain, I could find peace. And so on and so forth. I can tell you many, many very down moments. You know.
Thank you, Mohamedou. Our first question will come from Arthur Canegis. Arthur, and you are muted.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, I just salute you for your incredible courage and the fact that you were able to, you know, survive this and determined to, and to bring this crucial story to the world. And of course, to Nancy for the amazing job of hanging in there and just going through all she had to face. And I think all of us in the world owe you a great debt of gratitude. And I guess my question boils down to, you know, it seems like this story highlights the incredible need for world law. I mean, the fact that, the US could locate this outside of national territory, just a few miles, and suddenly the exact same people who wouldn't think of doing these things in the US can do these most horrid of crimes. It seems to highlight, the key fact that inside nations, it's illegal to murder people, torture, and everything. But in the world, it's just totally legal, considered honorable, considered great to run around doing these most horrid of crimes. So I guess the key question is, do you hope that your story in this movie can somehow help set in motion a conviction that we need to build world law? I have my own film called The World Is My Country, about an incredible world citizen, Gary Davis, who, you can see it, theworldismycountry.com, launched an incredible campaign for we the people to take the lead, not to wait for governments to do it, but for we the people to take the lead in creating a world government of, by, and for the people of the planet. And it's by the way, it's going to be on Albuquerque television May 2nd. It's going to be on public television stations across the country. If you go to theworldismycountry.com and click on public TV, you'll see all the times and places of the broadcast. And you can also click there to watch it free online. We'll give you a free advanced screening to help get word out about the showings. But tell me how you, Nancy, and both of you, how you feel this relates to the whole mission here of Citizens for Global Solutions of creating world law.
Well, I'll start. If we didn't have borders, we wouldn't have immigrants, we wouldn't have refugees, we wouldn't have people seeking asylum. But we created borders in this world. We created a lot of borders around Africa that the Africans had nothing to do with after the war, and the various wars, and Europe carved it up how they felt. And yet the European Union was an attempt, a start in a way, to take all of Europe and say we're going to try to make this all one union so people could freely travel. And if people can't freely travel, then we can never have a government of the whole world, in my view, to start with. But of course, if we could somehow have a government that works for everyone. I was in a play called If Women Ruled the World, and it was in Manchester. And we were at the very end of this, a very complicated play, but there were 5 actors and 5 women, all of us very different. And so at the very end, with the clock ticking, that toward the doomsday, we were asked, name something, each of us. And the first person said we would have world peace. And the second person said we would have no borders. And it came to me and I said we would have free education and free healthcare for everyone. And the person after me, who was a 20-year-old who kind of wasn't quite able to process that the 5 of us now ran the world in this scene, said, well, how would you do that in a country like Chad? And I said, well, you could have no billionaires, and then that would take care of it. And, we went through all of us, and it's really what we thought is what you're talking about. So there's no downside to working toward world peace, world governance, and people being able to freely travel.
Our next question comes from Fadia. Fadia?
Nancy and Mohamedou, thank you so much for being here today. Mohamedou, happy Ramadan to you and to your family. I actually have a question for Nancy. At the beginning, you mentioned that this movie could help the 40 prisoners in Guantanamo. I think my question to you is, how much do we know about prisoners who've been sent to the Emirates, been sent to Serbia from Guantanamo? How is the Obama administration still involved in that kind of process? Do we know a lot about legal support? Do we know what they have? Do you know what were their circumstances? And I'm specifically speaking for or about 8 Yemenis prisoners in Guantanamo been sent to UAE. Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, the prisoners who went to UAE, the Emirates did not abide by the agreement they made with the US, which was that they were to be released, and they have been in prison there. Many of the other detainees have been in not good circumstances. They've gone to places where they couldn't make a living. The Uyghurs for a long time were in Albania in a refugee camp. It's not been a good situation. And there have been people, and Mohamedou knows some, who refuse to leave. And in some cases, maybe they are better off there than in some other places. It's a very difficult situation, but I believe that it can be done. I know it has not been done well in the past, and Mohamedou was lucky to get to go home to his home country. And you know, that in itself was a struggle we had with the State Department, where he was going to go. But we have to keep working on it. We have to keep working on it diplomatically. We have to keep working on the ones who are there. There are 6 people there who've been cleared for release. One of them since 2009. And I know it's a very difficult situation with the Yemenis, but it's Obama who stopped any Yemenis getting out after this guy tried to light his underwear on fire, if you recall. He was Nigerian, but he had been trained in Yemen. And Obama said, nobody goes home to Yemen. And so many of the prisoners who are still there are Yemenis. But I know some of their families do have finances and have said, we can go to another country and support them, and they're not even getting out. It's a problem. I don't know that I know all the answers. I just know we have to keep working on it. And the Yemenis are a particularly vulnerable situation. I've been to Yemen, by the way.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Fadia. Do we have other questions? While people are thinking, I have okay, so Christy, go first.
One, thank you again for sharing your stories, both of you. And I'm wondering if, I mean, I'm in the midst of reading or listening to Obama's book. And of course, the very first thing he said was that he wanted to close Guantanamo. And I'm just wondering if there's been any conversation with either of you with Obama and the current Biden administration, and what you think we can do to support.
Well, I've certainly had no conversations with the Biden administration. I do know people who have. Mohamedou would speak to this actually, because Mohamedou has made some direct pleas to the Biden administration. So maybe you could talk about that, Mohamedou. I'm muted. You're muted, Mohamedou. You're muted.
I think he has maybe internet difficulties.
Well, he usually does. But if he can get back on, in the meantime, I can tell you that Mohamedou has written directly to President Biden And Mohamedou was also part of another group of prisoners who've written to Biden. Mohamedou, is your internet working yet? Does he realize you're muted? Something's wrong with the internet.
Mohamedou, can you hear us? Can you? Are you able to unmute? Oh.
How about you log out and try to log in again, Mohamedou?
Sometimes it helps to turn the video off because that takes up the bandwidth.
Oh. Mohamedou, you can keep trying and wave for me when you come back, okay? When you can get signal again. Christy, can I get back to you in this meantime?
I think I did already ask my question, and so maybe Maury or Julie have their hands up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie and Maury.
I'd like to thank Nancy and Mohamedou as well. And perhaps while we're waiting for him to come back, I'm wondering, Nancy, what led you to Mohamedou? I mean, how did you come to be doing this work, which sounds both rewarding and extremely frustrating? As a former law professor, I would love to be able to tell students how to do this, where to go, what to do.
Well, you know, I've been a criminal defense lawyer for, I don't know, 41, 42 years. It's always rewarding and frustrating at the same time. It's rewarding when you can help someone, help them get through a struggle. Sometimes that means just help them deal with being in jail. Sometimes it means you can get them an acquittal. Sometimes it means you can settle their case. Sometimes it means that you want there to be a situation where nobody ever knows that they were even in trouble because of their circumstances. So every case is both of those things. And in Mohamedou's case, it was particularly so because I got to know him so well, much better than I've got to know most of my other clients, not all, but most of them. Most of them kind of come into your life and leave your life. And he has stayed in my life since 2005 and continues. His son is my godchild. So, but also part of it is that I just got to spend so much time with him in Guantanamo. And how do people get into this? You know, I encourage all young lawyers to be public defenders if they can, to try to litigate anywhere they can. Public defender work. I've been a public defender. It's super hard and super rewarding. And that's where I think lawyers who want to get into the criminal defense field, who wanted to get into human rights, that's where to start, to learn about real people and real people's stories and how you can help them through their lives. And then for me, it was many ways a matter of luck. I happened to be in places and meet people and tried a terrorism case in Ireland, and I've taught pretty much all over the world. But you know, you just have to be open to possibilities, I think. But for young lawyers, the other thing I always want to tell lawyers is that lawyers have incredible amount of power. We have power to make change like no other profession does, really. No other profession can make change the way lawyers do. So I tell people that we have to understand precedent. We can't ignore it, but you always have to not be burdened by it. If people were burdened by precedent, we would never have had Brown versus Board of Education. We would have never had Gideon. People have to step out and say the courts were wrong, and we've got to make this right now, and use this power that we have for social change. That's what I tell lawyers. That's the highest calling, I believe. So I hope that answers your question.
Maury, did you have a question for Mohamedou? And you were muted.
I think Maury already.
I'm
is
sorry. I
Mohammed
was holding down my space bar. Nancy described her first meeting with you. If you can hear me and are back, I wonder from your point of view, what went through your mind when Nancy and her colleague came into your cell?
Maury, could you please repeat the last part of your question? I didn't get it.
Yes. What went through your mind when you first met Nancy and her colleague? It sounds like you were pleased to see them, but were you afraid or suspicious, or what was it?
I don't know how many people in this group have a legal background. So, I mean, the first advice I would give my client before I meet them, do not talk to the police 4 years and then call me. That's the first advice I would give them. So by the time I met Nancy, I had been interrogated for 3.5 years, incessantly. And by that time, I had nothing to lose. Either I provided willingly what I want to provide, or I was tortured to make false confessions. And the government had everything they needed to put me on an electrical chair, if there is anything they could have. So, and of course, I was very happy, and I was very trusting. I am a person who trusts right away. I trust you. As you know, why I shouldn't. And it's just a different philosophy.
There is a baby. Oh.
Because he is past his bedtime. Sure. Assalamu alaikum. I think we need to change his diaper. So, hello, Mino. Sure. Hello, Nancy. Sure. James.
How old is he? Hello. Salam alaikum.
Old 2 days ago. Since today. What's his mouth?
Okay. So we have, were you finished with your answer? Mohamedou? There is somebody else.
I didn't hear you.
Somebody else wants to ask you a question. Vinny.
First and foremost, thank you, Katya, for the invite to this excellent event. I'm curious, Ms. Hollander, in the movie, there was a moment that was incredibly poignant, very, very epic in the drama, where you were leaving Mohamedou, and Jodie Foster, he says, "You're leaving me. You're going back to your life." And then Jodie Foster looks back at him and says, "This is all I do." And I'm just curious, you said you were in a play earlier, if that was close to the truth, or is that Chestnut was created for the play? But if it is true, my question is, what is that keeps you going? I remember the great Antonio Gramsci said that I am a pessimist by intellect, but I am an optimist by will. That's my question.
You know, that actually was pretty accurate when Jodie said that. And I think she got that from me, actually, because for many, many years, it really is what I did every day, all day long. I have a son who's now 51 years old, and I told him he was raised by benign neglect. Fortunately, he survived. He laughs and says I was always there when he needed me, but I really gave everything I had to the law, and I loved it and hated it at the same time, because that's just the way it is. What kept me going was the stories, people's stories, and being able to make a change in their lives, and sometimes make a bigger change in cases that would affect other people and other broader communities. But the samurai, I've studied martial arts, and the samurai are obligated to protect their community, whether it's another person, another city, another state, or the world. And I believe that if we all do that, we can have a better planet. And the animals, includes the animals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Gail, you have a question?
Yes, I was struck by Nancy's being affiliated with the ACLU, because I have been a member over many years, but I haven't really, I'm not very familiar really with what they've been doing. So I was very pleased about that. I'm wondering if you could say more about what the ACLU's sort of role was. Were you recruited to this case through the ACLU, and how did the ACLU get involved?
No, we actually, in this case, I worked for the ACLU before I went to law school. I was a director in New Mexico, and we recruited the ACLU. I think we had a discussion with the ACLU, and they were looking for a case similar to this, and we asked if they would assist us, and they agreed to assist us in legal research. We're at the hearing, that was true, with tremendous support, particularly Hina Shamsi was tremendous support and became a part of Mohamedou's legal team. Another lawyer, Art Spitzer in Washington, became a part of our legal team and helped us read letters that were in Washington. Hina was instrumental, I believe, in helping get Mohamedou out. She's much more diplomatic than I am, and we had to talk to the State Department and do a lot of work. The ACLU also supports me through what became known as the John Adams Project in the representation of my other client who's still there, Ibrahim al-Nasri. And the ACLU didn't pay for us at all in Mohamedou's case, but does pay for al-Nasri. But the ACLU did provide expense money for experts and things like that.
Thank you. Nancy, we have a question in the chat. John is curious about the relationship to the military attorney who was portrayed in the film. Did he have any further input in the release of Mohamedou after he stepped down because of the knowledge he found out in the files?
Well, actually, he did not. The movie, there is some fiction in this movie. He's not the one who found the polygraphs. We knew about them because Mohamedou told us, and we fought hard and long to get them. Those motions to compel that you see in the movie was just one of many. We kept filing motions and more motions and more motions, and ultimately got them. And part of one is still classified, but they were important, not so much for his release as the movie says, but just they made a big difference early on for him that he can talk about more than I can. But the military lawyer, Stu Couch, is now an immigration judge. And although the movie has us meeting, the time was really a little different. I did not meet Stu until later, but he did refuse to prosecute Mohamedou, and that was the end of any effort to prosecute Mohamedou when he refused. And it was very bold on his part, and it was a hard thing for a Marine to do, and he did it.
Thank you. Mark.
Mohamedou and Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today. This is incredible. And watching the film, of course, there's many questions, and a lot of them are, did this happen this way or that way? But I think seeing you confronted Nancy with those rooms full of boxes was quite intimidating. And of course, the immediate question that comes to mind is, was it just you and Teri with all those boxes? And how did you, how do you process that much material in a short period of time, or limited period of time? And I guess the one question is did you and Teri actually have that breaking apart, or was that added to the film for tension?
Well, we did have lots of redacted material. We actually had fewer boxes than that until after we won the appeal, and then the government dumped a lot more information on us, most of which had nothing to do with Mohamedou anyway. But Teri's the one who really had to process all the information and organize it. And, that was her task. She's still the one who remembers more than I do when questions come up. And no, I never fired Teri. Teri, as I said, is a death penalty lawyer. She would not and never would care whether her client was guilty or innocent. But if someone had come to me with what she said, I wouldn't have done it in quite the rude manner that Jodie does it. And Jodie says that she's meaner than I am. But I would say that person should reconsider whether they really want to be a criminal defense lawyer, and can be. But as Teri's character, which is really an amalgam of some other people who were involved and one who did leave, her character is really although it's not really Teri, it's really a proxy for the audience, because that's what the audience is thinking right at that moment. And she becomes someone they can relate to. And I think that had a lot to do with how her character was developed. And Teri agreed to let that happen.
Does she work with you in your office?
No, she was an associate at that time, but not nearly as naive. She'd already tried the death penalty case in Oklahoma City and had been involved in that before she came to work for me. And then she became a partner in our law firm, and then she left to join a law firm with her husband and to just do death penalty work. And that's what she does now. Of course, we're very good friends, and we're all still good friends with Mohamedou and in touch with him all the time too.
Thank you, Mark. We have a question from Frederick.
Hi, well, I'm very thankful that Nancy and Mohamedou are able to join us on this. And I have kind of a human interest tidbit that I wanted to ask Mohamedou. When did you realize where you were? And when did you have an understanding about Guantanamo, or that you were at a place called Guantanamo? Thank you.
Mohamedou?
I think he might be changing a diaper.
He might still be on diaper duty. Yeah.
I might just ask then one transition for Nancy on, to know whether it was the real case when you came across the kind of the confession, or in the movie they came, Mohamedou's confession you found, and then whether the action going to Mohamedou, asking him to write, his story, because you needed to know what was going on, if that exchange really was kind of a similar transition to then him kind of writing more in detail about what the situation was.
Hold on, Mohamedou's calling me. Let me see if we can figure out what's going on with his. Mohamedou. Okay. But you can't do anything? Okay. I don't know what to tell you. Just try to go out and come back in. Okay. He's frozen. Sorry. This happens in Mauritania a lot. He's frozen. He's going to try to go back out and come back in. So now I've lost track of what the question was.
I might have jumped the queue too, sorry. I was just wondering if the movie where you found out that he had a confession and then went back,
right.
If that component was true and accurate.
Well, here's what really happened. We got to Guantanamo. Mohamedou had already written a great deal at that moment. He said, I want you to know about me. And that's when I learned that he could write, that he could read and write in English. And then sometime after that, I wrote to him and said, and that went to a secure room in Washington, and I didn't get to read it right away. So I didn't really know what it said for quite a while. In the meantime, we wrote to him and said, can you tell us everything your interrogators have asked you? And he wrote back something that's in the movie and said, that's like asking how many girlfriends Charlie Sheen's had. I was interrogated 18 hours a day for years, which shows you his sense of humor also. But he did start writing those letters. And he and we, I think, realized at about the same time that this was becoming a book. And he, at the end, really made it into a book and wanted it published. So it's not that he hadn't started it. He already had. And he had previously tried to write it in Arabic and they had destroyed it. So that's the way it really happened.
Thank you, Nancy. Melanie.
My goodness, this is phenomenal. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here and telling your story. And my question is, so you have these actors portray, an actor portraying you, an actor portraying Mohamedou. So that must feel pretty strange. And I just wondered if they met with you and Mohamedou to kind of get your personality, or was there any consulting that you did? And most of all, was there something in the film you're like, why did they do that? Why? So that's my question.
Mohamedou, are you back? Can you answer this?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, should I go back to the question about how do I find where I was? Because I was actually told by this German-American CIA operative. He told me in background that I was going to Guantanamo Bay. I never heard of the place, and he explained to me. And then actually I was happy because he told me it's under the full control of the United States of America. And from my understanding, the United States of America is democracy. If you didn't do anything wrong, you shouldn't be afraid. And I was in for a very big surprise when I got to Guantanamo Bay, because Guantanamo Bay was designed to circumvent the rule of law, as if the United States of America really, a lot of people in the intelligence community really didn't want this democracy that is going in the United States of America. And they have this philosophy of look at those dictators in the world. There are no terrorists. They are very safe because they don't put on the gloves. They don't have the restrictions of the law. And this is so wrong in my mind, because precisely because of those restrictions put upon law enforcement agencies, countries are better, and there is more security, and there is more prosperity. But countries who don't have those so-called gloves and the so-called restrictions, they're doing really very bad, either failed states or states. And yeah, I know all along that I was going to Guantanamo Bay. The other question again, please.
Did you want me to say my question?
Yeah, the question, please. Could you repeat it?
So, yes. So here you have an actor portraying you, your person, your personality. So was it strange to see that? And also, were you like looking at the movie saying, why did they put that in? Did they consult with you to get to know your personality, meet with you? And also, when you watch the movie, did you say, why did they put that in?
Thank you, Melanie. So this is not impersonation. So this is acting. And I couldn't have hope for a better actor. He's obviously good looking. He's very young. He has very good physique. And I always joke with people and I say, I will put him on my profile when I go on dating sites. And yeah, he's a really very good choice. As to consulting me, I'm not part of cast. So when they cast people, I'm not part of that process, and I try to stay as far away from it as I could, And because I believe in professionalism, that those people, they know what they're doing, and I leave them do what they do. He spoke to me, he talked to me, and he asked me some questions, mostly about cultural stuff and about the accent, because he had some lines in Mauritanian and Arabic, and I coached him a little bit to pronounce them correctly.
Thank you, Melanie. Jim.
Start out by unmuting myself. Again, it's been a very interesting presentation. I want to start, the starting point of my question is, frequently it's been asked, can't we just close down Guantanamo? We are down to a small fraction of the number of inmates, and presumably these are the hardcore that are perceived as being a threat. They can't be. Hundreds of people have been, I'll say, found homes for them in other countries under various conditions. Now down to a very small number of people that nobody seems to want. So my question I'm leading up to is, what are the impediments to close down the 40-some remaining prisoners that and close the chapter on Guantanamo? Or is there a reasonable solution to that dilemma?
Thanks. I think there is a reasonable solution. And I don't think that they're all hardcore, because 33 of them have never been charged with any crime, approximately 33, never charged with any crime after all this time. So in this country, we don't hold people indefinitely who've never been charged with a crime. We don't do that. That's not part of our criminal justice system, and we can't make it part. As I've said, 6 have been cleared for release. It's only a matter of finding homes for them, sending them home or somewhere where they'll be safe. The rest of them, if they haven't been charged, they have to go. They have to go. And that's just the way it is. They're just going to have to be released, because otherwise you could hold anyone indefinitely and say, well, we can't charge them, but we're not going to release them. What does that even mean in our justice system? It's just incomprehensible if you think about it. As for the ones like my client, Ibrahim al-Nasri, and the others who've been charged, we have to work out solutions for their cases that make sense, that provide due process for them. That could be any number of things. It can be a settlement. It could be a transfer to another country. It could be release because we really don't have the witnesses. Don't forget, the right to confrontation does not exist in Guantanamo. The right to confrontation, such a bedrock principle of our criminal justice system that even Mr. Scalia agreed with, that does not exist in Guantanamo. These people can be convicted based on hearsay. We can't let that happen. We have to get rid of the military commissions and find reasonable solutions. It can be done. It will take political will and political capital on the part of the president. If he has it and is willing, can expend it, it can be done.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Nancy. Jack.
Hi. Thank you, Katia, for putting this together. And Nancy, I think it's just wonderful that you chose to devote your whole life to giving a voice to people who would otherwise not be able to speak for themselves and free themselves. My question has to do with Guantanamo Bay. It seems if Guantanamo was structured to be a shield to escape US justice, how is it that you were able to pierce that shield? And second question is, would it have been different if the camps were in another country, let's say in Afghanistan or Yemen? Thank you.
Well, and Mohamedou was the beneficiary of other people's very difficult hard work in taking these cases to the US Supreme Court until we finally got the Boumediene case that said they could, the government had to respond to the habeas cases. And also continually appealing in cases of the military commissions. And we were the beneficiaries of that hard work by a lot of lawyers. It is different in Afghanistan, where there is a prison, or certainly was a prison. And those people did not fare well because the government was able to say it wasn't on US soil or US controlled soil. Don't forget, the US controls Guantanamo Bay, and through a lease with the Cuban government going back to 1903. So we do have a relationship with Guantanamo Bay that we don't have with other countries. And people have not done well in those other countries from a legal standpoint. I've not been involved in those cases. I only know about them and from the other lawyers who I've worked with. But again, a very difficult situation because they don't have even the minimal rights that people in Guantanamo have.
Thank you, Jack. Mark.
Mohamedou, I'm absolutely, after watching the film, I'm amazed that you held it together through all of that. And I'm also very impressed with how you are approaching it now. And I was wondering, both in the case of the film, it showed us, as you went through that experience, various things and thoughts that you had about, that helped you cope with that. And I was wondering if you had, if there were trains of thought that helped you get through that you could expand on. And then secondly, I've read a quote from you recently in one of the reviews saying that you were interested in having tea with the people who tortured you. So I'm curious, about how it's just stunning that you are handling it so well and so open about it now. And I almost hear the word forgiveness. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I would love to hear you expand on that. And then I also, at the end of the film, I think they mentioned that you had a couple other books that they were holding back on you or something. And I was curious about what your next book projects would be.
So, as to forgiveness, forgiveness is something that I give to myself. It's a gift. I love this saying. It's not my saying, it's a saying of a young Canadian Lebanese woman who said, I don't forgive you because you ask for forgiveness or you deserve forgiveness, but I forgive you because I need peace. And forgiveness just gives you this peace of mind because you just free up place in your mind to the people you care more about and to go on with your life. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's very easy to talk about, but it's not easy in practice to forgive someone who hurts you so bad. And it was not my first instinct, to be honest with you. But upon reflection, upon educating myself, I really decided to forgive everyone. And if you look at it from practical point of view, Richard Zuli, who oversaw my torture, is an old man. I have no use for him suffering, absolutely none. I want him to have a good life. I want him to have his family around him, be happy, and I'm just setting him free. I'm setting everyone who tortures me free in any shape or form. And that's actually my point of view.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark is working on his PhD in genocide. So I'm sure he has his reasons to ask that question. Thank you so much, Mark. We have a question from Gail.
I'm wondering, when you left Guantanamo, I mean, of course you had a life in Mauritania, but I wonder, you were gone for like 7 years. And I'm wondering if there was any support, or if it was just going back to the family and friends that you had, or, you know, that could be a very difficult process for a lot of people. And I'm wondering what was entailed in your case.
I went more than 15 years, little bit over 15 years. And 15 years is a very, very long time. People I left like children, they were grown-ups. And people who were only like 15, they were like 30 years old. They finished high school, they finished college, they have been working. And people who were 30, they were now 45, etc., etc. I remember like looking at the pictures of my family and take every picture and write the name and memorizing them every day. I go like through them at least more than once a week to memorize their names. And it took me a very long time to call people by their names, my family, you know, and it's very challenging, you know.
We have a question from Talia. She would like to know if any of the guards were punished, and second, if you, Mohamedou, received any apologies from any of the, you know, from any of them, openly or privately.
Yes, I did receive apology from some of the guards. And they called me like privately, they contacted me through social media. And also the American ambassador in Mauritania apologized to me. He invited me to the embassy and to his home. And it was good. And I thought that was really very good gesture. So far, there is no, this is the closest to official apology I could get. So I understand all those people made this on a personal level. And of course, the ambassador is the representative of the United States government in Mauritania. And yes, I'm very happy about it because, I mean, this is good for the United States of America, you know, because it reflects good on it, and because the United States of America is the leader of the world, and they should show by example that the rule of law works, that democracy works. And they have a lot of work to do on that front.
Mohamedou, can I ask you super quick, hard questions? How frequently were you fed?
Like, it depends on the time. Like when I was in torture, of course, I didn't have the feeling of time. I don't know what time is it. I don't know days or nights. All I know that they let me starve for a very long time. They give me very little food. And I eat very little bit because they give me only like 10 seconds or 20 seconds to eat. But after that torture was over, they allowed me to eat just like our detainees. no problem.
Do you have any idea how many times you went through the torture sessions in 14 years?
So the very intensive program started on May 22nd of 2003, and they start to drive it down toward the end of the beginning of 2004. They start to drive down slowly.
So you and Nancy won the case 7 years in, and then the Obama administration appealed. So were you tortured in the last 7 years when you were appealing, waiting for the appeal?
No, I was not tortured. The only thing they did to me, they told me if I don't cancel the court order to stop my interrogation, they will punish me. But the punishment wasn't really that harsh. They just took my books, they took my the movies that my lawyers and my family sent me, and they took just what I had, and they just like put me with the general population, and they took what they call comfort items.
Did they allow you to shower and sun? Recently, I read about one detainee that he said in 7 years, no, in 11 years, he was allowed 6 times to go and sunbathe. What about you?
No, during torture, I was not allowed to shower. They only shower me when they need to shower me, like hose me, as a sign of humiliation. And then, but after that, they allowed me to shower, just like how the thing is.
Nancy, were you allowed to go and see him every time you actually wanted?
Well, we had to request a visit. We had to make sure we could get on an airplane. It depended on, sometimes the planes went and sometimes they didn't go. But most of the time we could go when we wanted to, as long as we gave them enough advance warning.
Okay, so we are in the end of our program, and I wanted to let Nancy and Mohamedou to give their final considerations for us before we finish. Nancy?
I think I've probably said enough already. I appreciate very much the work you are all doing. We all work in our own ways, and this is the work I've chosen. It's given me tremendous fulfillment in my life. Some called it hard. I found it rewarding, and I just appreciate the work that all of you are doing. Thank you very much for putting this together for us.
Thank you, Nancy. Mohamedou?
Katia, thank you so much for inviting us. This has been a pleasure. And, I just want to thank you so much for having me. Keep doing the good work.
Thank you so much. Mohamedou, Nancy, you are always welcome to visit us, Citizens for Global Solutions. We are very happy and grateful that you both were able to join us. Nancy, you are 1 hour ahead, and Mohamedou, I think 5, perhaps. Thank you so very much for sharing with us your struggles, your fight, and your win, if we can say that, even if it was after so much pain. I want to thank everybody that attended on behalf of Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota. This program was recorded and will be on our website by the next week, maximum. You can look in the Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota past events. You always can contact me. Everybody has my email. Everybody can contact me. And I would like to thank again everybody for what you do. We have here some people from ACLU, from Amnesty International, of course, the host, Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota, the entire board of directors. Thank you all so much, everybody. We also have some people from Security with Human Rights. I'm not sure if there are other organizations. They didn't approach me, but I want to thank you again. I hope that we are able to see still in our lifetime the Guantanamo closing, at least Biden promised, but we heard those promises before. So I hope that Biden will fulfill his promises. Again, thank you so very much. Have all a very good night. I hope to see you again next month in the next film discussion that the name will be released very shortly. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Our love to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your work. And Mohamedou, thanks for your forgiveness.
Thank you. Everybody, a big applause to Mohamedou and Nancy. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.